So, hello and welcome to my podcast, Conversations with David. I am your host, David Owasi. And on this podcast, we're talking to professionals and entrepreneurs across the country. We are learning about what keeps them passionate, what keeps them going, and we're also talking about lessons learned along the way. I am here with my very good friend, Emily Mathison. I am very, very excited to chat with her today. I've known her for quite some time now. And why don't you introduce yourself, Emily?
Hi, thanks so much for having me on, David. Like David said, my name is Emily Mathison. David and I met each other through College Pro Painters. We were both franchisees there. And I work in marketing and sales. I'm based in Victoria, BC. What else about me? I don't know. I love the island. I just got a dog in June. He's a big part of my life. Pretty positive person overall, at least these days.
Awesome. Yeah, you're a dog mom. I track you on Instagram and I see your dog a lot.
He's the best.
That's awesome. Yeah, Emily, I'm going to start off with how we got to know each other through College Pro, and you ran fantastic business over the 2 years. I believe you were involved in business. I guess my first question for you is what drew you into running a business and entrepreneurship as a whole? What was the interest for you?
Well, to be honest, College Pro was very accidental for me. I was in the business program at UVic. I was doing BCom, and to kick off the core part of the program, they have sort of like a mini conference for the BComers, and there was a booth set up there, and I was nervous around all these new people, and we're all wearing our business clothes, pretending to be professional, but really you're just like a bunch of kids. And I was looking around. I was like, well, I guess I better talk to some of these people. I got to do a co-op at some point. And I actually ended up talking to Nicole Gallup, who ended up being my business coach. I was definitely in the right places. I was interested in business, and I was curious about entrepreneurship, though I didn't know much about it at that point. But definitely the College Pro kind of landed in my lap there. And from that point, I felt like I, got swept up in the crazy world of it.
That's pretty neat. Yeah, that's right. When I think about my own introduction into College Pro as well, and just being a business owner, something similar. I was at a university, and then there was this booth, and I had to I was very interested. Someone was saying you can make a lot of money this summer, and of course, I was interested in making money. So that was quite a journey for me as well. And it was almost accidental in a way, but it was an accident that I was very grateful for after the fact, right?
Totally, it changed my life.
Absolutely, same for me. I'm very curious though, Emily, about your first year in business. What was that like? And the reason why I asked that is, of course, there are some of our listeners who might be thinking, maybe I want to run a business, maybe I want to do something. I mean, we're in a pandemic, there's a lot of time to do stuff like that. What was that first year of being an entrepreneur like for you?
Insane, intense. It was every high, every low, a ton of learning and very fast paced, but absolutely amazing. It was equal parts the hardest thing I'd ever done and the best thing I'd ever done. I was balancing College Pro with my third year of university, but it was like the first core year of my program. So both were really important to me. And the way that I had it structured at that point, College Pro hours were only meant to be, part-time hours while I was in full-time school. But as probably any entrepreneur can tell you, when it's something that you care about and something that you love, you're really working on it around the clock. At the very least, it's on your mind around the clock. So yeah, it was drinking through a fire hose. I think there's a lot of folks in College Pro who describe the learning like that. And once I got down the fundamentals and the base understanding of, the concepts and able to sell a paint job, then I was able to move on to building a lot more personal skills, like selling skills or leadership skills, and being able to bring people in to help me support and grow my dream. So there was many phases throughout that, but they were all heavily laden with lots of learning and lots of laughs, lots of tears. Yeah, it's a whirlwind.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with you. When I think back to my first year as well as a business owner, college pro painting, for me, all I think about was lots of hard work, lots of pain, good pain, right? Lots of growing pain. But I guess for yourself, what would you say was the theme of your first year? Now, when I speak to a lot of people, some people say it's a lot of pain. Some people say just learning work ethic. For some people, it's all about, some of the soft skills to learn. Was there any general theme if you think about your first year as a business owner?
Hmm. I think that's a really good question. The theme probably learning to fail fast, to put a couple probes out, try a couple different tactics, and then shortening that time between deciding if that's actually, if I want to continue to pour resources in that, or if I need to pull that back, and recognizing earlier when it's time to pivot. So I made tons of mistakes, but I got better at making my mistakes faster and recognizing them quicker, and being able to take that learning and then apply it to the new path chosen forward.
Hmm. That's amazing. Walk me through what that process looked like for you. So you call it, was it failing fast? What was that you called?
Yeah, failing fast.
I really like that concept. Can you unpack that for me? So how did that work? How did you track your failures? Was that intentional or that just kind of happened? Or can you just walk me through that?
Yeah, I think that really that process was more formalized through this system that with your business coach that you work through College Pro, called goal setting and review. So a weekly process where on, let's say, a Sunday night, you're going to sit down and look at what does my business need. When I'm looking at my larger annual goal, and then those are broken down into proximal monthly goals. Okay, now what do I need to do this week to be able to hit those larger goals? So with that, strategizing and deciding what tactics you're going to employ that week, there's some reflection on the week before. What went well, what went wrong, how did I feel about that, how did my team feel about that, and really on a weekly basis, being able to decide what exactly I'm going to carry forward with intention and what I'm going to scrap. Because I think it's pretty easy to just get caught in a hamster wheel of working hard, but not necessarily working smart. And then also having a business coach was really, really key, to have someone else and an outsider perspective to look in on that planning, and especially someone who I respected so highly and who had a lot of experience and a lot of success in what we were doing. So I'm sure she was able to tell me things before I even went and spent resources on it, of like, oh no, I've tried that. Don't bother going down that road. But usually she let me, figure it out for myself, because that's when you learn, is when you're making the mistakes.
Right. So from what you just said, I was able to pick up on two things. The first one was the importance of setting goals on a week-to-week basis and being able to analyze that to decide how you want to move forward for your business. Second thing I picked on was having a coach, someone who you trust and respect, who can give you that outside perspective. I guess my question for you is, for someone who say maybe they're just starting out in their business, they don't have the formal structure that college provided you and I. How should they go about, number one, setting goals? What does that look like? Or what would be your recommendations? And number two, how should they go about selecting a coach or someone who can guide them through that process? And why is that important for a new business owner?
Hmm. Well, I think there's a lot of different frameworks that you can follow for goal setting, and you really just need to explore, just do a big Google and figure out what's the system that works best for you.
Hmm.
Everyone's got a bunch of different ways they're going to tell you is the best way to set and achieve your goal. But really at the foundation of every single system is writing SMART goals. So what is that? Like specific, measured, attainable, realistic, time measured, I think, or
Yeah.
I think that
Time
wrong.
sensitive. Yeah. Something like that.
Correcting me. You know what I mean? Those SMART
Hmm.
goals. Um, and yeah, setting those consistently and writing down the goals. A goal that's written down, you're going to achieve it however many more times. I think it's like at least 15% more likely to achieve that than if you hadn't written it down. And that was so key. So key. Yeah, writing goals in a way that it has an action plan written into the way that you formulated the sentence of that goal, and then actually going and writing it down. For me, the system I used to deciding on those goals is I took the concept of, and there's this really great book called Traction that that goes into this in a bit more detail, but when you think about all your different priorities, and especially if you're starting a new business, there are 10 times more things to do than there are minutes in the day.
Mm.
So you need to priority manage those, and making a list of all those things and deciding on what your A priorities are, or your big rocks, deciding on what your B priorities are, small rocks, C might be sand. And so you have to put the big rocks in first,
Mm.
and then you can fit in the small rocks, and then you can kind of fit in the sand around there where it works. So as a visual tool, that kind of helps, but really deciding what are your A, B, and C priorities, what must be done, what would be nice if it got done, and what doesn't really need to get done.
That's an amazing insight. Thanks for sharing that, Emily. And also on the other end of, choosing the coach, someone to kind of walk you through that process. I know with College Pro, that was kind of not a choice. You just had that. But for someone who, is starting their first business, they don't have that support network, how should they go about finding a coach, and what should they be looking for in a coach?
Finding a coach, I think you would just look out to your personal network. It depends, I guess, who you are, because a couple things come to mind. Like, if there's this awesome platform called Flick that I've gotten to know the founders of recently, and they're amazing. So that's Female Laboratory of Innovation and Knowledge, and it's meant for female founders to be paired with apprentices. So usually those are and who are also women. Usually they're early career or even still in school, university or high school, and it's matching the founders with the apprentice for unpaid up to 10 hours a week, I think it is. So, if you were a woman in high school or university, like that would be an avenue that you could go and find an excellent mentor and get some real hands-on experience. So I think it kind of depends where you're at, but just look at who do you really look up to? Who is doing the things right now that you wish you could be doing? Who has the connections, who shares the same values as you, and then just reach out to them and ask. Really, everyone likes, like, it's flattering. Everyone likes to be asked. And it's a hard thing to ask. It's a hard time sending those cold emails. But that, especially as an entrepreneur, you must get good at cold calling. And you might as well start in a safe place like your network. And yeah, just look around who's doing the thing that you wish you were doing and reach out to them and ask if they would support you.
Absolutely. That's fantastic response, Emily. And I really like the idea of cold calling and just messaging people who you think you would want to work with. I think for myself, that was one of the huge learning points of being an entrepreneur, is just being able to pick up the phone and just call someone and make your way through, from a receptionist to someone who is the gatekeeper, if you will, and kind of just making your way. I think that's a very, very important skills for entrepreneurs to learn, right? So one of the things that I've always had, one of the reasons why I've had huge respect for yourself, especially from our College Pro days and from your business, was your net promoter score. So you had a ridiculously high and impressive net promoter score consistently over your 2 years. Now, for our viewers who don't know what net promoter score is, it's basically a way to track how happy customers are with the service a business provide. And what we'll call a world-class net promoter score is usually anything over 60%. And I believe you consistently hit that metric, right? Around 60%.
I think it was 69% my first year and then 92 in the second year.
Which was insane. That's ridiculous, but I mean, very impressive at the same time. Can you just walk me through how you approached the whole idea of customer service? I mean, I know every business tries to think about customer service and whatnot, but you especially did a great job in that. Can you just walk me through your process?
Yeah, so this is something I really learned from my first year to my second year. I think in my first year, I was taking it all on myself. I figured I'm the only face of the business. It's up to me to make my customers happy. Yes, I've hired people who are going to help deliver that job, and hopefully they'll be happy with the quality of work they deliver. But I wasn't really thinking about the interactions that, like, realistically, I'm showing up on site and I'm, having minutes interaction with these homeowners per day, but my painters are on site for 8 hours a day. Why wouldn't they be the ones who are delivering more of the experience than me? So that was something I really learned in my first year. There was a couple things that or like different jobs that had pulled my score down a little bit. And I was so upset about them because I knew I had a really good relationship with the client and we had a really good thing going. But there was one little thing or two that had happened throughout the day that didn't get communicated back to me. So I wasn't able to fix it. So what I'm going into my second year, the change that I wanted to make was really communicating from the very first moment from the interview. So it's consistent messaging and consistent expectation set. That net promoter score is something that's really important to us. It's really important that we are holding, that's one of our shared values, and that we're holding that integrity and that we're delivering high quality jobs and high quality experiences, that we're being respectful, that we are in someone else's home, we're on their property. Yes, it's your work site, but they live there every day. And empowering my entire team to own that net promoter score. So at the end of the day, or the end of the job, when we close off on a job and do a bit of a post-mortem, what went well, what didn't, net promoter score was part of that conversation. And I think in my first year, my team didn't even know what a net promoter score was, or that we had one at all. So yeah, in the second year, I had team leads that this is something that they were really proud of, that their team consistently got 10 out of 10s. And really for them, it meant that they were probably going to get a good tip, or that the homeowners are going to, give them some lemonade or something at lunch. Like, it's all just good practice, right? But it's important to be communicating that from the very beginning and really empowering everyone in your team. Even if they have minimal interaction with the client's going to remember that, and letting everyone know that they have responsibility for the customer experience.
Yeah, that's amazing, Emily. And I guess that really was the secret to the success of your business. Sounded like you really cared a lot about the experience your business provided to your customers, and that kind of just went through your business. So, for example, so I guess for someone listening to this conversation right now and they're thinking in their business, well, I want a world-class net promoter score. I want my whole team to show that. How do you empower your employees? I know you mentioned that you empowered your employees to be able to deliver that kind of experience. What would be the first step of a business owner towards empowering their employees? What should that look like?
Mm-hmm. Um, well, I think kind of like what I was saying before, first thing in the interview process, like just be bringing it up right then. And it's part of the expectation setting. It's part of the onboarding. This is a metric that your performance is partially going to be measured by, in whatever way you want to structure that. And letting them know that they have ownership over it. Another thing I would kind of backtrack to add on this is that I was also communicating to the clients right from the beginning, that, at the end of the job, I am going to call you and ask you if you would recommend me to your friends. I'm going to ask you what you would rate me out of 10. And it's my goal to get that 10. I don't like 9 is great, but really I want to make sure that you are wanting to run to all your neighbors and give them my card, and you want to be friends and whatever. So when clients knew that and they had that in mind, and I was saying, so if something is slipping below a 10, please tell me, then they were telling me proactively, and we were able to address the issue proactively rather than reactively. Then emotions are already charged, and there's only so much you can do when it's a damage control situation. So yeah, sorry, that was just another thing to add on to managing net promoter score. But as far as empowering employees, I think it's clear communication, clear expectation setting right from day one, and making it a part of their key metrics they're measured on.
I really love your answer, Emily. I really like the idea of being very proactive, because when you're on top of the situation, it's easier than trying to, limit damage control, which is what you said. I think businesses should have that mindset. That's awesome. Now, switching gears a little bit. Now you're no longer in the painting world, of course. That's a lifetime ago now. Can you walk me through the process of when you decided, okay, I'm done with running a business. I want to move into, I guess, more of a corporate setting, if you will. What was in your mind, on your mind, or how did you make that decision on your transition? How did that work out for you?
So for me, I wrapped up College Pro at the same time that I wrapped up my degree. And I was really fortunate that I was specializing in entrepreneurship at the end. And so that coincided with, the final production season of College Pro. And I got to really hammer home some of that entrepreneurship theoretical learning in actual practice. But I think stepping out of the program, like with school, I just felt like something was coming to an end, and I felt like College Pro was so tied to that, and it was time that I step outside and try something a little bit different. I felt like if I stayed in College Pro in that specific program, I would have still kind of had one foot in the past while one foot moving forward. But then I guess, I had the option to go and try and start my own business, or move more into private. And I did some traveling and did some soul searching, and I landed on, I'm not from Victoria, but I love Victoria so much, and I knew I wanted to come back here. And the business community is phenomenal. It's really tight knit, and it's very interconnected. And I wanted to try and break into that. I wanted to be a part of that community. It was something that I definitely looked up to, and especially within tech. So that led me to just trying every single thing I could, contacting every company that I thought was doing cool things in Victoria that was in the tech space. And, I took my time and applied for a lot of different positions. And then I found the one that I'm at now. I would say the biggest thing for me was that it was an amazing team. And it's a really small startup. So I was still able to exercise some of those entrepreneurship muscles and skills. And I think that's really been valuable, I hope, at least for the company, that I've been able to bring that entrepreneurial attitude to my position here. So I guess I found a bit of best of both worlds.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's amazing. So you're not completely out of your entrepreneurship space, but you're just using that skill set in a different setting, I suppose.
At that point, yeah.
At that point. And is that where you are right now, or that's you moved from there?
Well, I've kind of got my side hustle going on that's entrepreneurial. So that's something that I have co-founded with two other amazing women in Victoria here, who I know through the business and tech community. And it's called Her Story. And it's a weekly newsletter celebrating Canadian women who lead. So Shelley Voyer and Humera Ahmed are my two other co-founders, and Shelley Voyer approached Humera and I and asked if this is something we'd be interested in. And we've been running it since, I want to say this past May. So April, May, peak COVID. You're like, why not? Let's launch it.
That's pretty amazing.
So that's been fun to have, my 9 to 5, which is a bit more stability, although I do get a ton of autonomy in this job and get to make a lot of decisions, which is amazing. But to have that happening, and then on the side, have Her Story running, and have complete freedom between the three of us to decide what direction we want to take it.
That's awesome. And I definitely would love us to talk about Her Story in a minute. But before we move on, I'm just curious for your take on, what's your advice to someone who is making transition from, or who's thinking about making a transition from running a business to doing something else? What would your advice be to them, considering, you found some success in making that transition? I know oftentimes for entrepreneurs, it's hard to make that decision. Should I go run on that business, or should I try and go in corporate and get some more experience? What would be your advice for someone who is thinking through that process for themselves?
Well, I think if you've ran your own business, you've learned, you've basically got an MBA, but how do you communicate that to a potential employer if you're looking to join a team? And that's definitely a difficult one. But if you've been running your own business, you're probably good at selling yourself. So I think you should really think about what are your core competencies, and what is your brand? As cheesy as that can sound, everyone does have a brand. And when you're approaching recruiters, you need to clearly and concisely communicate what that is, so that they can put you in their box, in their mind, and they can align you to the position and know really immediately what you're about. The more you can simplify that and narrow that down, the better off you'll be. And it takes some time, and it's probably not something that you can completely uncover on your own. I would encourage asking friends, asking family, asking coworkers, employees, mentors. What do you think I'm really good at? Where do you think I've really delivered value in the past? And then build up that persona in a physical way that maybe that's a personal website, or maybe you just have, a rock star resume, or maybe you really are working on growing your LinkedIn presence, something so that when people look at you, they go, oh, David, I know what he's about. He's great at entrepreneurship. He loves to hear people's stories,
Absolutely. Yeah, that's amazing, Emily. I think from what I'm hearing from you, the idea of branding yourself or having some way to define your career or what you're very good at in some fashion, I think that's very, very important in building a successful career.
Mhm.
That's awesome. Now, I know you were talking about her story earlier, and now I want to let's talk about that some more. I know based on that conversation here, the concept or the idea of woman empowerment sounds like something you're very, very passionate about. Can you just share with me kind of why that is a passion for you, why that gets you going? Can you just share some more information about that?
Totally. So many reasons.
Of course.
I think personally, I've often worked in male dominated industries. And I think that it's important to lift women up and show them that you are working in those industries and there's a face that they can look at and they can say, oh, that person looks like me. So yeah, maybe I could have a seat at that table one day myself. So yeah, I'm definitely passionate about making women feel more comfortable about stepping into those spaces. My current 9 to 5 right now, I work in tech, but I also work, but our industry is the water industry, and we work with local governments, and the water industry is notoriously male. I made a presentation in Nashville last year, and I think there was like one woman in the crowd, like 100, and they were all like Southern guys, like from the US. It was awesome, like a really cool experience, but super nerve-wracking. So I think it's really important to have resources and tools and support systems out there to help women when they're stepping into those spaces feel like they can own their power a little bit more, and that they deserve that seat at the table.
Absolutely, and I definitely do agree. For myself, I definitely, the idea of seeing women like yourself, kind of taking that charge is very encouraging, inspiring. What's your vision for her story? Like, where do you see her story going? Which is your side project? How do you see that impact? And I know you're talking about the stories of successful women, especially in Canada, right? But what's your goal with this project? Where do you see it going in the future?
Mm-hmm. Um, well, you know what? I think that's something that we're defining right now, and I don't want to spill the beans on anything and speak
Fair
for the
enough.
team too much. But what has worked well so far is that we've put out some pretty good content, and people like to read stories.
Mm.
Opinion is interesting. I think stories are even more interesting. And when we're featuring these particularly innovative or trailblazing women, it helps to kind of like what I was saying, it shows like, hey, there's someone that looks like me. There's someone that came from a background like me. And look, they're doing it. And it goes to this whole, she has to see it to be it concept. So I hope to continue to put out excellent content that our readers continue to engage with on a high level. The concept of permission marketing I was reading into the other day, it's Seth Godin, his blog is all about that, right? Attracting people that you're getting their permission to send them information. So you have to hold up your side of that relationship and make sure that it's always high quality and that you're not delivering something that they didn't expect or trying to take advantage of them. So I think we're really doing that right now. And I want to make sure that we continue in that really uplifting and high quality direction. I think we can take it so many different ways. Like we had an amazing event for International Women's Day last year, and I'd love to do that again this year. There's mentorship opportunities. Yeah, there's so much that we can do beyond the newsletter. I've played around with a couple of little podcast things like this myself, which is kind of fun to try new things and what you get to do when you're an entrepreneur. It's just you
Yeah,
get to these
Try
days.
new things. Absolutely. Definitely
Try new
agree.
things. Yeah, exactly. See what works. And so, yeah, I want to play around with a bunch of different media, but make sure that the content remains really high quality and that our following remains really strong and that they're there for the right reasons.
Absolutely. And I have read some of your stories and, they've been amazing. I've read about amazing people and some of their, great accomplishments. But I guess at a macro level, where would you say, women empowerment is at a general level, maybe looking at a country like Canada or perhaps North America? I'm sure there's more that can be done. What is, in your opinion, what more can be done to really help improve that side of things?
Mm-hmm. I think it's getting better. I know it is. Like statistically, it's getting better. Yes,
Mhm.
we're closing the pay gap, but I don't think we're doing it at the rate's still too slow. And I think that it's good that these conversations are coming out. And I think it's really important that these conversations are had between men and women.
Mm.
Women are really aware of these concepts, but if we just keep talking about them amongst ourselves, it's just an echo chamber and
Right.
nothing gets done. So you really need to bring the other 50% of the population into the conversation. And I think the way to do that often is to tie it to the bottom line and show, how much higher earning, or higher performing diverse teams and gender diverse teams are.
Mm.
And on that I think women-led businesses, we've got to give them money. More
Sure.
VC dollars must go to women-led, women-founded
Mm.
companies, and especially ones of people of color.
Mm.
It just makes business sense. Like
Mm.
consistently, these companies outperform those that aren't of a visible minority. And I think that, yeah, we've got to give them money. We've got to give them a chance. And we can't just be giving these companies money because they're female. There was this great article I read recently about that giving VC dollars to women-led businesses is not a charity.
Yeah.
And that's really the case. Don't use it to diversify your portfolio,
Mm.
Do it from a dollars and cents perspective.
Absolutely. And thanks for sharing that. Definitely, I'll be sharing the link to your project. What's the website? I guess I'll get
Yeah,
that's
it's herstory.io.
.io. Perfect. And that's amazing. Now, I'm very curious about your current work at Waterworth. It sounds like something you're very, very passionate about. Water is something that is ubiquitous, is something that everyone needs. What drives you with this work you do? Why do you think it's important?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll say to start off, so we sell financial management software to local governments or any entity that runs a water system.
Okay.
And that is random and niche and something that I didn't really ever think about before I started this job. But I really enjoy it. And I think it's important because, like you said, water is our most valuable resource. And as I'm learning through this job, we actually quite undervalue it in North America
Hmm.
because we're fortunate enough to just turn on our taps and there it is. It's clean. It's always there. Even in British Columbia here in some of the northern communities and indigenous communities, they've been on boil water advisories for decades.
Hmm.
And that was mind boggling to me and really made me see how privileged I was to that have never really been a consideration. So I think that it's, maintaining our water infrastructure, which is really what Waterworth does, is it
Hmm.
helps communities make sure that they're bringing in enough money to be able to sustainably replace their infrastructure. Are they replacing pipes in the ground, pumps, anything like that, proactively instead of waiting for things? I'm sure you've driven down the road and seen water coming out
Yeah.
of great, yeah, like a burst main, and
Mhm.
so everything costs more in an emergency. And then that leads to service interruptions. And, it's usually lower income communities, especially across the US, that are the ones who suffer from this.
Mm.
So, it's been really interesting learning about that. And I think really important to bring that into more of the collective conversation and increase our value of water and our
Mm.
understanding of how lucky we are to have such consistent, safe access to it.
Absolutely. And I definitely really understand that because I grew up in Nigeria. I was born and raised in Nigeria for the first few years of my my life, and water was not something that was there. You had to actually, struggle to find clean, good water. So I definitely understand where you're coming from. And especially when I came to Canada, I was able to really enjoy the benefit of having access to clean water all the time. It was more of a privilege for me. So yeah, lots of communities, especially our northern communities, our First Nation communities that don't have access, more needs to be done for them. Totally agree. So,
Definitely.
so what's your role and how do you contribute to the company? What do you do actually?
So I manage all sales and marketing activities at Waterworth. So anything that has to do with generating revenue falls under my lead. We're a really small team, so we wear many different hats. So it's definitely, it helps for me fill that part of entrepreneurship that I love, that you're doing a million different things throughout your day and you're never bored, and you've always got a whole bunch of balls in the air, and there's a little bit of stress in trying to keep them up in the air, but it's good stress, keeps you going, keeps you driving. So yeah, I run everything. We take a content marketing approach to our marketing. So all that strategy and that executing on all that content. And then, yeah, all any outbound sales activities or negotiating channel partnerships for sales. And recently, we're growing the team. I actually just hired someone on to join me in sales and marketing this week. So I'm really excited to see what more we can do.
That's awesome. And I guess I'm curious to get your take on these at a general level. Of course, these issues with water, especially for some other communities here in Canada and around the world, is something that has been going on for decades. What do you think, as we move into the future here, what do you think is a fix for this? Is there a fix? Is it possible to solve this problem? How do we support those communities, especially for someone like myself who is not very knowledgeable in this issue? What are your thoughts on that?
Mhm. I think that it's a really complex issue, and it depends where you're at across North America, because there's such differences in regulations. Honestly, like, we work more on the financial management side, but that would be probably more of a policy question. I'm just not as educated on that, but I would say overall, that communicating the value of water is a part of that, because there are communities that they haven't had any increase in what they pay for water, let's say in a decade. Well, that doesn't, I'm sure there's been population growth at least to match inflation. Your rate should have gone up. And if people aren't used to having to pay a little bit more at a certain frequency, when you do go to increase it, there's big pushback. There's community pushback. There's politics involved with it. So if we can get communities to be making this more of a conversation with their ratepayers, with the citizens, then I think there'll be more understanding when money does need to be spent to upgrade this infrastructure, because yeah, they kind of more understand the full cycle of the system. Now, when it comes to communities that are just really underserved, or like really small, and it's hard for them to get that economies of scale, I'm not as sure, but I'm sure there's folks out there that would say that the federal government needs to step in more, or yeah, larger government agencies need to provide support to those small or rural communities.
Yeah, fascinating, fascinating. It is an interesting problem. Of course, it's very complicated. It's not something you can solve in a day, but I am very excited to see people like yourself working on problems like that. It means that the future is bright.
Yeah, it's fun.
It is fun. Now, one of the things that has been very, that I find it interesting is the role of emotional intelligence and soft skills in career success. Whether, if you're an entrepreneur or if you are, working in corporate world and, as a professional, what would you say the role of emotional intelligence or social skills or soft skills, if you will, how has that defined or played a role in your success for you?
Mhm. Well, I mean, I guess that to answer that, I have a certain perception of my level of emotional intelligence, but that's like self-perceived. So I'm sure there's areas that I'm definitely lacking in, that I'm not as aware. And I know I can always get better, but I think the parts that have served me well to date, I consider myself a pretty empathetic person. I think that's really important, especially when you're in sales and marketing, like myself. You need to be able to empathize with your client, with your prospect. What are the pains that they're going through, and really just listen. Listen without the intention of just responding or saying, oh, great, you said that. Well, here, this feature, I can match that pain point. Log it. That's important work to be doing in your mind. But really try and listen and let them know that you're there, you hear their issues, that you're on their team. I also think that emotional regulation is a super important part of emotional intelligence, and it's something that I continually work with. Um, there's things that people are going to say to you, especially when you're in a sales position. Someone might say something nasty to you. I luckily haven't had that working with local government. Everyone is sweet as pie. That's been nice. But I know when I was in college pro, I'm sure you've had someone, swear at you and slam the door in your face and whatever, and just having the emotional regulation to say, you know what, that's their thing, that's not my thing, and not let it ruin your day, and be able to move forward. And same thing if you have a team member, who blows up at you for no reason or whatever it might be, instead of being triggered and getting upset yourself, because then you're not going to be able to have a productive conversation with them, to be able to hold your emotion, and make space for them and what's happening.
Mm. Wow, that's a fantastic answer. I'm not very surprised that you've been very successful in your business, having a world-class net promoter score with that perspective. I agree with you. Empathy is very, very important. Empathy is all about putting yourself in the shoes of the other person and trying to understand where they're coming from. And I also believe regulation, emotional regulation is super important, especially in this very charged environment we are in these days. And being able to make sure that your action is consistent with your long-term goals, I think is very, very key as well. What would you say has been your journey in growing those skills? Because of course, no one, is born with those skills just there. Some people have, a better aptitude for mastering those skills than other people. But for someone who is trying to grow those skills and trying to be empathetic and trying to be more in control of their behavior to make sure that it's in alignment with their goals, what would you say has helped you to grow those skills, and how can they do that?
Hmm. Um, that's a good question. I think a lot of it is trial and error. Um, you know, at the same time, I think you should be treating it just like any other subject and seeking out resources to learn. For me, podcasts, I love podcasts, so that's how I prefer to take in a lot of my information. But maybe for you, it's books or videos or whatever it is. But definitely treating it like any other subject and committing yourself to try and be better at those skills and learn them. But they're hard to measure sometimes. It's hard to know if you're actually moving the needle on it. So I think the way to measure that would be just through practice, through your experiences. Maybe you're a leader and you felt like, yeah, you've really lacked empathy in the past. Okay, well, what are some systems that you can put in place? Maybe you want to do some goal setting with an employee and set out a bit of a growth map with them. And then as you work with them through that and they have their struggles, you can reflect back on yourself. Well, how good was I at listening to them, in my perception? Do I think that I was able to help them overcome that challenge or at least feel heard? Um, I think there's different ways that you can intentionally put it into practice, and then there's also ways that just happen. Just as you go through the motions of it, like you said, this year is triggering. Things are going to happen. Things are going to piss you off. Someone's going to say something to you that you do not agree with, and trying to like catch yourself, because the emotion is fair. Like, feelings are facts. Feelings happen. That it is a fact that you're feeling that feeling, and that's okay. And I don't think that you should try and suppress or feel that having the reaction to begin with was wrong. I think it's then what you choose to do with that feeling and how you choose to act and move forward from there. That's the regulation piece, and like that's the important one. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with your answers. These are well thought out answers. Thanks, Emily. When I think about that question, I always go back to awareness, right? So one of the key things for me is, for you to manage your emotions, if you will, or to be empathetic, you need to first be aware of where you are and how you're feeling. And I feel like if people are not aware of things, then they don't even know, they're very oblivious to what they're doing. They don't even know that they're throwing a fit. They don't know that they're offending other people. And I think awareness is always key. Would you agree with that as well?
Oh yeah, awareness for sure. And man, is that hard. Because sometimes you think, oh, I did well, and then you get some new information down the line and you're like, oh, what? Like that's how they perceived me. Awareness is so tough because our egos are there. Everyone has ego. That's totally fair. And we're, ideally trying to diminish it. But yeah, it's a protective thing though as well. Like there's it's gotta help us. So you can ask for feedback. You can ask for really honest feedback and choose the people wisely who you are asking for that feedback. Or maybe tell them ahead of time how you prefer to receive the feedback so that you won't get your guard up and you can actually receive it in a constructive way and work with it. But yeah, that self-awareness is key, but tricky.
It is very key and tricky. Now, when I do coach, I coach businesses and most especially entrepreneurs and small businesses. And when I'm trying to coach for awareness, I do have an exercise I always try to get people to do. So I get them to like focus on a specific skill. Say, for example, patience, right? If you're trying to be more patient, then I get them to like rank on a scale of 1 to 10 how patient they are. And then they give themselves a score. And I get them to find 3 or 4 people in their lives in different settings. So like family, and then maybe someone a work setting, and then maybe like a casual acquaintance. And I ask them to send questions to those people to ask them to rank them on where they think they stand on that scale. And then when you see people's ranking, and you try and make sure, you tell them to be as honest as possible and
Mhm.
not be biased at all. And then when you see like 3 other people give you a score on how you measure on a scale, and you kind of take the average of all of those scores, I think that gives a better idea of where you stand, which helps you to be more aware of how you rank on a specific scale. And uh,
Totally.
and I found that to be a very useful technique because I use that myself. Feedback is huge if you're trying to grow or do anything. I guess you have to have a lot of feedback to really know where you truly stand, right?
That sounds really valuable because you could just be going through life and being like, I am so patient. I'm the chillest guy. And people are like, no, you see how you blew up in traffic? Like you are not. Yeah, that's a really good exercise. I'll try that.
Yeah, absolutely. And only when you know is then you can then make adjustments and start to make changes, right?
True.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's awesome. Emily, I do have one last piece of question, I suppose, and I'm very curious. We're in a pandemic,
Yeah.
and of course that has affected everyone in different ways. I'm very curious for yourself. You're a very accomplished person. How have you handled? I guess the first question is: has that changed anything for you in your life? I'm sure it has. And how have you handled that? Both from an emotional, mental, physical perspective. How have you handled that?
Big question. Oh man, it's been a roller coaster as it has for all of us. Yeah, it was sad at first. It was tough. I'm an extrovert. Even just the fact of being alone in my apartment and I didn't have my dog yet at that point, like that might not sound like a big deal to some people, or for some people it might sound like their dream, but I really liked coming into work and interacting with my team and having that physical social aspect and yeah, that team bonding. So I miss that. Yeah, blew for a minute, but really tried to reach out to friends and stay connected, and keep an eye on the future and things improving and keeping mindful that it's temporary, nothing lasts forever. This really sucks right now, and it's still probably going to suck tomorrow and for a little bit, but like we're just going to keep going and just try and be resilient. And then I think finding things to, fill in that brought me happiness outside of work, because I was really, really fortunate to be able to keep my role throughout the pandemic. But there was a moment there where we weren't sure what the future of the company was. So yeah, it was important to find other things. If that was, for me, I got really into baking, and then I got really into eating the baking, which wasn't so good. But yeah, finding just little things to be able to do for yourself to keep you positive and keep your day diverse when you're in lockdown is super important. And then I think kind of like moving out of that a little bit when we started to get a bit more freedom throughout the summer. I'm really fortunate that on the island here, there's so many beautiful places to explore, like hikes, beaches, lakes, things like that. So I spent a lot of time just getting out and enjoying the beautiful place that I live in, and trying to maintain a positive mindset. I did notice at one point that my news consumption was just getting out of control, and that it was triggering my emotions like no other. And I was waiting for those daily news debriefs, and it just was so toxic. So for a while there, I deleted my Instagram and I got rid of like my news apps, and I only allowed myself to go on and check it when I felt really happy and like stable in a good place within myself to go look, and made sure that it wasn't a daily thing, because there is a lot of fear messages going around. And yes, it's definitely something to be afraid of, like definitely something to be mindful of. But you need to find your own way to navigate through that. And I don't think that anyone can live in a state of fear or stress or anxiety for that long, without causing some serious harm to their lives or to their health.
Absolutely. And of course, with mental health being something that everyone is paying more attention to, if anything, this is the perfect time to really pay attention to your mental health.
It is. It is. If you haven't been to therapy, go to therapy. It's the best thing you'll ever do for yourself.
Hmm.
Get a mentor, get support systems, pay attention to your mental health, whatever that looks like for you. If that is journaling,
Hmm.
whatever. Yes, 100%. I'm so glad that this is being talked about more, and it is so important. And especially if you want to run your own business,
Hmm.
I expect people to join in and help you build your team build your dream.
Hmm.
You need to take care of yourself, because that burnout is real and is just around the corner.
Hmm.
And it's important to have those systems in place beforehand. So when things hit the fan, you've got a safety net.
Totally agree, Emily. And for myself, one of the things that have gotten me through all of this pandemic and being holed up at home, and I'm an extrovert just like yourself, and it was
Yeah.
very, very difficult for me to just be holed up. Meditation for me was really, really important.
Nice.
Just kind of being in my own head and just kind of decluttering all of the stuff there, and just being able to be in the moment and just be right there with myself, and just almost self-talking and self-dialoguing, almost decluttering all the stuff in my brain from everything I've read to what's going on around the world. I think that was very helpful for me to feel less stressed, less anxious, and for me that was huge for myself.
That's awesome. That's something I'm working on.
Hmm.
I have had moments of it here and there that it feels good, but I need a consistent practice.
To be fair though, it's very hard to do that. But I find that if I pair it with another activity, so for example, I have a hot tub. So for me, I do all of my meditation in the hot tub.
Oh, nice. That's good.
Yeah, so it's a little easier because I'm in the water, it's warm, it's a little cold outside, I'm looking at the stars outside, so it feels a little easier to meditate. And I know sometimes meditation can be very hard to just discipline yourself and stay there.
Yeah.
I do have one last question for you, Emily, and this is more, no right answer or wrong answer about this. I'm very curious about your take on what the future would look like. So, of course, we're in a pandemic, a worldwide event. I like to call it a catalytic event. So, almost a catalyst for something big. What would you say, in your opinion, is going to change as a result of this pandemic? It doesn't have to be negative or positive, but of course, I think that some changes will happen just because it's a worldwide event. What, in your opinion, is going to happen moving forward? Or is there any predictions from yourself about what the future holds as a result of the pandemic?
Oh man. Um, wow, big world predictions.
Mm-hmm.
That's tough. I don't know. I don't think that I have like, oh, this is the future, like I'm sure Other people are more qualified to speak on that than myself, but the way that I see trends going, at least, is we're breaking down some barriers of communication. For example, you and I doing this right now. This is great. You're in Winnipeg, I'm in Victoria. It doesn't matter. It doesn't feel like we're distant. And all day long, I talk to folks across the US, and it feels the exact same way. So I think breaking down those barriers of communication and feeling more like that global community sense is something that I hope that we can cultivate. And then also what we were just talking about before with mental health, having that be more a part of open communication, open conversation. I think that's really important. And hopefully we're going to see companies as well start to put more concerted effort and resources into helping support the mental health of their employees. And that's not just, beer on Fridays and like kombucha on tap and you can bring your dog to work. Although I can bring my dog to work here and it helps my mental health 100%. But making sure that as a part of the benefits package, that you do have dollars to spend on a counselor or a psychologist, whatever you need, that creating a norm for, instead of feeling the need to say, oh, I'm feeling really sick, I think I have the flu, to say I'm taking a mental health day. Like, that is fair, that is okay. And that example needs to be set by someone. Ideally, it would be, someone in a position of leadership. But I think more communication and more attention and sensitivity towards mental health.
Absolutely. I do agree with you, Emily. I hope we see more of that. But then with someone like yourself, who I'm sure in the future will be moving into more and more leadership positions where you're influencing more and more people, I believe that things like that will start to happen. Any last words of advice, thoughts before we call it a day?
I think just be as positive as you can throughout this. I know it's really hard. Try and be kind, reach out to the people around you. Your network is, whether that's friends or family or professional, is the most important thing that you have, are the people around you. So make sure that you're spending time on those relationships, that you're communicating with them. If you need to take some time to step away from those relationships, whatever you have to do to take care of yourself. Be gentle with yourself. Allow yourself to get scared and allow yourself to make mistakes. But hold yourself gently and try and stay positive and just try your very best.
That's awesome, Emily. Thank you very much for your words of advice and wisdom. It's been such a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.